talk a little bit about color. So if you remember, maybe you were told this as a child, if you had a blue crown, a red crown, a yellow crown, you could use those colors to make any other color. And that was true to an extent. Your colors are really cyan, the blue here, magenta, there's your red, yellow, and black. And that's assuming that you are putting these onto a white substrate, a white piece of paper. Okay. So you could use these four colors to make not every color, but considerable amount of color, certainly in the millions. Okay. So how this goes is we'll have to take an image, okay, and there's a CMYK image. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, black. And there's a CMYK image on a white piece of paper. Remembering that this is a CMYK image that is being shown to you on an RGB screen, so it's simulating a CMYK image. So how this would be printed is you would start off by printing the yellow, and it look like that. And then when you add the magenta to it, then you would add the cyan to it, and then you would add the black to it. So that would be what's called a four-color print job: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Okay. It is also an additive technique. The more color you add, the darker it gets. Okay. So we add and add color until we get to black. Okay. Now how this looks when you zoom in on it, it's sort of like George Seurat and his pointillism technique. Some of you might have recognized this painting from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where they zoom in actually on this little girl's face right here, Cameron looking at it. But basically what it is it's a whole bunch of little dots. And of course when you stand back away from it, your eye blends all the dots together and it looks like a smooth color. Now we'll zoom in on what it actually looks like. Okay, so there's our final on the left, which is our full color job, cyan, magenta, yellow, black. And you can see what the dots look like. The dots get bigger and smaller, and they are on screens. These screen angles actually mean things. So the yellow is one screen angle, the cyan is another screen angle, the magenta is another screen angle, the black's on another. They have to be printed on angles because if not, when you zoom out, you can actually see patterns. You can see like a checkerboard pattern if they're not all at these askew angles. But you can see here how the magenta and the yellow go together to create the orange tint. And down here, the cyan and the yellow mix together to give us the greens. And then in these darker greens down here, some of the black gets in. Okay. And then this portion right here where it goes from the green to the pink color is where we lose the cyan and get the magenta, and there's the pink coming in. So that's what it looks like when it's all zoomed in. Okay. So the next thing we have is the opposite of the CMYK print job, and that's what you see on screen. Okay. And that's RGB, red, green, and blue. Okay. So we add red at its full value, and then we add green, and then we add blue. Okay. So the more color I add, in this case it's subtractive, I get less, right? So now I have, the more color I add, I get to white. Okay. So if I have full value of red, green, and blue, I get white. Now you may notice where these overlap, look what colors it's formed. Cyan, magenta, and yellow. So this is all actually pretty scientific stuff. It's the colors blend to make opposites of themselves when they're in the different color schemes, additive or subtractive. Okay. Now these are also measured slightly differently. The cyan, magenta, yellow print scheme is measured on a scale from 0 to 100. So you can have 0% black or 100% black. Okay. The RGB is actually measured on a scale from 0 to 255. Okay, so a 255 green will give you this. A 0 green would be black. Okay, so now we can talk real quick about gamuts. So you'll see here, not all colors, wait for the police to go past, not all colors can be represented by these different color spaces, okay? CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, black, is a much smaller subsection of color than RGB is, which means I can create images in RGB on the computer screen that I cannot print, okay? And most of the time, it's these fluorescent greens and these fluorescent blues, okay? That's where you'll find it the most often, okay? You see the yellows and oranges get pretty close to printable. Okay, but RGB, like I said, you can definitely create some stuff in an RGB. You can create some stuff that looks great on the computer monitor, and then when you print it, it looks horrible because you just can't get to these colors. Okay. And then RGB can't quite create every color we can see with the human eyeball. Now remember, I am showing you this on an RGB monitor, so this is yet again a subset of what you can actually see with the naked eye. Okay, so CMYK is a smaller subset of RGB, and RGB is a smaller subset of the colors that we can actually see with the unaided eye. Okay, so we'll go real quick into Photoshop and show you how to choose colors. All right, so here is a Photoshop color picker. Okay, so we've got two things here that we are familiar with. This red color, you'll see it has no cyan in it, there's no black in it. It's got 92% magenta and 66% yellow. Okay, if I wanted to make it a even truer color, I can tweak them by hand. Let's go like 75, right, to create an even different red. Okay, and you'll see as I tweak these values change. So now I'm at 237 red, which is almost full red for RGB, 25 green, 25 blue. Okay. Now there's two others up here, HSB and lab color. Okay. Hue, saturation, brightness, luminosity, A channel, B channel. These have a lot more to do with photography, scientific calculations, things like that. So we don't really use them as much in desktop publishing. Definitely the RGB and CMYK we do. Okay. And then down here, we have the hex color. Now, hex is a way that we've been determining color for the World Wide Web since its creation. Now, there was a time, and you'll see what this little graphic, leftover graphic here is what they considered web-safe color. So when all this first started hitting in the early 1990s, PC monitors had 256 colors, I think. Mac monitors had 256 colors, and they weren't the same 256 colors. I think only 216 of them were the same on both monitors. So you would have something that would give you what would be called a web-safe color. Now, if I click this, you'll watch this number change, okay, to a web-safe color. That meant it would look the same on a Mac and on a PC. Now, those days are long since gone. All computers, all phones, watches, everything now supports millions of colors. So choosing a web-safe color is no longer a thing. Okay, but you can see that this hex value changes just like the way the other values change. And these 6 characters will give you, millions of colors in combination. Okay, so that's called choosing it via the hex value. I show you the hex value because that is how you choose color in Canva. Okay, now this is one of the reasons why Canva is a bit of an issue, because you cannot print a hex value. So if I create something in Canva and then send it with a hex value, the person, service bureau, or printer printing it has to convert that hex color into CMYK first. Okay, but we'll get into that in a moment when we go over choosing color. Okay, so we've covered hex, covered RGB, we've covered CMYK, and then, like I said, lab and HSB, which we don't really use. Okay. But now we'll talk about something called a spot color. Okay, so pop up the Cheerios box here. Okay, so if you ever look under the flap of commercially printed product packaging, like cereal in particular, you'll see some of these colors that we're familiar with here. Okay, we've got cyan, right, magenta, yellows, blacks. Okay, 50%, 25%. Okay, it's kind of like just a test. Okay, but what you won't notice here is there's actually yellow in the cyan, magenta, yellow, but now there's this other yellow. Okay, that's the Cheerios yellow. In this particular case, it's called a Pantone 108. Okay. So let's talk about Pantone. So what Pantone is, and what it aims to do, it is a monopoly that needs to exist. You want it to be a monopoly because Pantone makes ink that is then sent all over the world. Okay? And it's the only company that does it. So if I choose Pantone 108 as my yellow, I'm Cheerios and this is my yellow, okay, then I know that if I print a cereal box in Malaysia, they will use Pantone 108 and my cereal box will be the same color as the cereal box that I have printed in Dublin, Ireland, because they are going to be using Pantone 108, and it will be the same color as the small box of Cheerios that I have printed in Kalamazoo, because they will be using 108C, and it will also be the same color as a print advertisement if I so choose to have a fifth color in there, or a t-shirt or anything along those lines. I can choose Pantone 108 and know that it will be the same color no matter where it is printed in the world. Okay, and that is called a spot color. Pantone is the brand name, Spot is the technical name, a spot color. Okay, so you'll see that this print job is not a 4-color print job, it's a 5-color print job. Okay, it's going to be cyan, magenta, yellow, black, or typical 4, plus a spot color. Okay, so in this particular piece here, this yellow will be Pantone 108. Everything else will be a mixture of the 4. And if you ever have a magnifying glass or something like that in your hand, and you're looking at a cereal box or something like that, if you look right here very, very closely, you'll see that dot pattern that we saw in the butterfly's wings in that other image. You won't see it here, because here it is just pure 108C. Okay, so here would be a flat color, and here would be all that dot mixture to create our other colors. Okay, so that is what spot color is. Okay, now we'll talk about again how these inks hit the paper. Okay, so like we saw with the picture of the car, the yellow goes down first, then the cyan, and the magenta, then the black. Okay, but that requires something we call registration. Okay, that is 4 different plates with 4 different colors of ink hitting that paper at 4 different times. Obviously, they must all line up perfectly. Okay, now in an image, if something is slightly out of register, you can get away with it. You might not see it. If it's in something like text or a graphic, it becomes apparent very, very quickly. Unless like you're like Andy Warhol and you want it to be apparent. So let's say we have a letter T, okay, and we're going to print it with 4 colors, which is a mistake. Okay, we wouldn't do this. But if each frame, each color is slightly off, see how the T becomes almost blurry? A little bit of a yellow tinge. Because again, not all 4 plates line up perfectly. and then I get a little bit of a blur around those edges, okay? So that is what we call out of registration, and that's what would happen is if you were to print text with a 4-color black, okay? When we would print text, we would print text with a 1-color black, okay? And here's the 80%, okay? But if you would make it 100%, there's your black T, okay? So we would always print text like this in black, okay? Now let's say, well, I don't want black text. I want, I want some blue text or some green text or something like that. Fine, you can do it. You know it's been done. You've seen it. But you have to be careful how you choose that color. Again, cyan, magenta, yellow, black, okay? So if we jump to Photoshop again, and we open up that color picker, okay? So here's the red. Let's say, oh, this is a pretty red, okay? But look at our colors here. We've got 19 cyan, 100 magenta, 100 yellow, and 9 black. Okay, so we've got all 4 colors in there, and we're going to run into this issue we ran into with registration. So what can I do? Well, I can definitely get rid of one of these colors, right? I can get rid so that there's no black now. Color didn't change a whole lot, and I'm down to 3 colors. Okay, you should try to make it down to 2 colors if you could. If you could convince yourself or your client that just a 2-color red would be what you're looking for, that would be the best case scenario. You can add a 3rd color in there. For the most part, for colored text, try and keep it just to 2 colors. Now, that is something I won't really bother you about too much in this class. Again, because of the limitations of choosing color in Canva, you're going to have a really hard time choosing colors that don't break this rule. Okay, so I won't require you or grade you or anything like that for selecting colors in Canva this way. Just know that if you were doing it for a print job, you might want to tweak that color slightly so that it is only 1, 2, or 3 colors, not 4. Okay. So next we will get into the this week's design.